You walk into a crowded room and trip slightly on the edge of a rug. It is barely anything. Your foot catches, you stumble for half a second, and you catch yourself. But in your mind, the room goes silent. Every head turns. Every eye locks onto you. For the rest of the night, you replay it, certain that everyone saw, certain that everyone is thinking about it, certain that you have become the main character of someone else's memory in the worst possible way. Here is the strange part. If you actually ask the people in that room, most of them would have no idea what you are talking about. They did not see you stumble. They were not thinking about you at all. They were thinking about their own conversation, their own drink, their own slightly itchy sweater, their own version of the exact same fear you were having. This gap between what you assume people notice about you and what they actually notice has a name. Psychologists call it the spotlight effect. And once you understand how it works, you start to see it everywhere, in your own life and in the lives of everyone around you. The spotlight effect is the tendency to believe that other people are paying far more attention to you, your appearance, your mistakes, and your behavior than they actually are. It is the feeling that you are standing under a bright spotlight on a stage, with every flaw and slip-up clearly visible to an attentive audience. In reality, almost everyone else is under the impression that they are the one in the spotlight. Nobody is watching you nearly as closely as you think, because they are all busy worrying about themselves. This idea was given its name and its scientific backing by two psychologists, Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky, working out of Cornell University in the late 1990s. They wanted to understand why people felt so exposed in social situations, even when there was no real evidence that anyone was paying close attention. So they designed an experiment that has since become one of the most cited studies in social psychology. And it involved something almost comically simple, a t-shirt. In the study, researchers asked college students to put on a t-shirt featuring a large image of a musician, most of them found embarrassing, a singer named Barry Manilow. The students were told they had to wear this shirt and walk into a room full of their peers. Before they walked in, the researchers asked them to estimate how many people in that room would notice and remember what was on their shirt. Most of the participants guessed that around half of the room, roughly 50%, would clearly notice and remember the embarrassing shirt. The actual number was far lower. When the researchers asked the people already sitting in the room, only about 25% of them had even noticed the shirt at all, let alone remembered the singer's face on it. The students wearing the shirt had overestimated how much attention they received by roughly double. They felt like they were standing in a spotlight. In reality, most people in that room barely glanced at them because they were focused on their own thoughts, their own conversations, and their own self-consciousness. Gilovich and his team did not stop there. In a follow-up version of the experiment, they had students wear a flattering shirt instead, one with a popular and well-liked image. They expected that maybe people would underestimate attention this time, since the shirt was not embarrassing. But the same pattern showed up. Once again, the students significantly overestimated how many people would notice and remember what they were wearing, whether the shirt made them look good or look foolish. The spotlight effect did not care about the content. It only cared about the fact that the attention was on something connected to the self. This told researchers something important. The spotlight effect is not just about fear of embarrassment. It is a broader bias in how we think about our own visibility to others. Whether we are wearing something we are proud of or something we are mortified by, we consistently believe that other people are tracking us far more closely than they really are. So why does this happen? Why are we all walking around convinced that we are the center of everyone else's attention, when in reality, most people are too wrapped up in their own internal spotlight to notice ours? The answer comes down to a basic feature of human cognition called egocentric bias. Egocentric bias is the natural tendency to view the world from your own perspective, and to assume, often without realizing it, that other people share that same perspective. You experience your own life from the inside. You feel every mistake, every awkward pause, every change in your tone of voice. Your own embarrassment is loud and immediate to you, so your brain assumes it must be just as loud and immediate to everyone watching. But other people are not inside your head. They do not have access to your internal experience. They are only seeing a small slice of you, filtered through their own distractions, their own worries, and their own internal spotlight pointed at themselves. This connects to a closely related concept called the illusion of transparency, which is the belief that our internal emotional state is more visible on the outside than it actually is. If you are nervous before giving a presentation, it might feel like your nervousness is radiating off of you, visible to everyone in the room. Researchers have tested this directly. They have had people perform stressful tasks, like giving a speech or even lying convincingly, and then asked both the performer and the observers to rate how nervous or how obvious the deception looked. Time after time, the people performing the task believed their nervousness or their dishonesty was far more visible than the observers actually reported. We feel exposed on the inside, and we assume that feeling shows up just as clearly on the outside, but it almost never does. Part of what drives both of these effects is something cognitive scientists call anchoring. When you try to guess how much attention someone is paying to you, you do not have direct access to their thoughts, so you use the only information you actually have, which is your own awareness of yourself. You are anchored to your own perspective. And even when you try to adjust for the fact that other people are not you, you do not adjust nearly enough. The result is a built-in overestimation every single time. Once you understand the mechanism, it becomes easy to spot the spotlight effect playing out in ordinary life, often in ways that quietly shape your decisions without you realizing it. Public speaking is one of the clearest examples. Most people who are afraid of speaking in front of a group are not actually afraid of the words they have to say. They are afraid of being watched, judged, and remembered for every stumble, every shaky hand, every awkward pause. But research on this exact fear shows the same pattern as the t-shirt study. Audiences consistently report noticing far fewer mistakes than speakers assume they noticed. A speaker might leave the stage convinced that everyone clocked the moment their voice cracked. In reality, most of the audience was thinking about their own to-do list, their own deadline, or simply trying to follow the content of the talk, not cataloging every flaw in the delivery. The same thing happens with appearance. People spend significant time and emotional energy worrying about a small stain on their shirt, a bad haircut, or a slightly mismatched outfit, convinced that everyone around them will notice and judge. But studies on the spotlight effect applied to appearance show the same gap again and again. Other people are simply not scanning you with the same intensity that you are scanning yourself. You know every detail of your own appearance because you stared at it in the mirror for 10 minutes before you left the house. Nobody else has spent that kind of attention on you because they spent that same 10 minutes staring at themselves. In the workplace, the spotlight effect shows up as the fear that one mistake, one typo in an email, one wrong answer in a meeting will be remembered and judged by everyone present. People will replay an awkward comment for days, certain that their coworkers are replaying it too. Meanwhile, those coworkers have usually already moved on, distracted by their own inbox, their own meetings, and their own version of the exact same anxiety. If any of this sounds familiar, if you have ever replayed a small mistake for hours while the people around you forgot about it in minutes, drop a comment and tell us which version of the spotlight effect hits closest to home for you. And if you want more breakdowns like this one on the hidden rules running quietly behind your everyday thoughts, make sure you are subscribed, because this is exactly the kind of thing we dig into on this channel. It is worth asking why human brains evolved this particular bias in the first place. Wouldn't it make more sense from a survival standpoint to accurately judge how much attention other people are paying to us? The answer seems to lie in the fact that for most of human history, being noticed and judged by your social group actually mattered a great deal. Humans evolved in small, tightly connected groups where reputation, social standing, and the approval of others had direct consequences for survival. Being excluded from the group, even temporarily, could mean losing access to food, protection, and support. In that kind of environment, a brain that erred on the side of overestimating social attention, treating every mistake as if it might be noticed and judged, was a brain that stayed cautious and avoided unnecessary social risk. The spotlight effect may have started as a useful overcorrection, a built-in alarm system that kept our ancestors from carelessly damaging their standing in the group. The problem is that this alarm system has not updated itself for modern life. You are no longer living in a group of 40 people who will remember every misstep for the rest of your life. You are living in a world of strangers, coworkers, and acquaintances who are each running their own internal spotlight and have very limited bandwidth left over to track yours. The ancient wiring is still running the same overcautious program, even though the social stakes of a small embarrassment today are nowhere near what they once were. This bias is not just a curious quirk. It has real costs. When you consistently overestimate how closely you are being watched and judged, you start making decisions based on a distorted picture of reality. And those decisions tend to shrink your life rather than expand it. People avoid raising their hand in class because they are convinced a wrong answer will be remembered by everyone in the room. People avoid trying new activities, wearing certain clothes, or speaking up in meetings, all because of an exaggerated fear of being watched and judged. Over time, this avoidance becomes a quiet, kind of self-imposed limitation, built entirely on an inaccurate model of how much attention other people are actually paying. The spotlight effect can also feed directly into social anxiety. While it is not the same thing as a clinical anxiety disorder, the underlying mechanism, the belief that you are under constant observation and judgment, is one of the core engines that keeps social anxiety running. The more convinced you are that everyone is watching and remembering, the more pressure you put on every single interaction, and the more exhausting ordinary social life becomes. The good news is that because the spotlight effect is a measurable, well-documented bias, there are concrete ways to push back against it. The first strategy is the simplest one, and it is literally what the original researchers used to expose the bias in the first place. Test your assumption against reality. The next time you are convinced that everyone, more often than not, you will find that the moment you have been replaying in vivid detail barely registered for anyone else. Doing this once or twice does not erase the bias, but it gives your brain real evidence to draw on instead of pure assumption. The second strategy is a deliberate perspective shift. When you catch yourself worrying over how visible a mistake might be, pause and ask a simple question. What was I thinking about 5 minutes ago, before this happened? For most people, the honest answer involves their own to-do list, their own stress, their own minor worries, not a detailed assessment of the people around them. If that is true for you, it is almost certainly true for everyone else in that room as well. Their attention is pointed inward, the same way yours usually is. A related trick is what some psychologists call a distancing exercise. Ask yourself whether you will still remember this exact moment in 5 years. If the honest answer is no, that gives you a useful clue about how much mental real estate this moment deserves right now, today, in the middle of feeling exposed. Most of the things we are convinced everyone is watching closely are things that we ourselves will forget within a week, which tells you something important about how much weight strangers and acquaintances are actually giving them. Finally, simply naming the bias in the moment can take some of its power away. When you notice that familiar feeling, the sense that every eye in the room is locked onto you, try mentally labeling it. This is the spotlight effect talking, not an accurate reading of the room. That small act of recognition creates a gap between the automatic feeling and your response to it. And that gap is often enough to stop the spiral before it builds momentum. The spotlight effect reveals something almost comforting once you sit with it for a while. Yes, you are not as invisible as you might want to be in your most anxious moments, but you are also nowhere near as watched as your anxious brain insists you are. Everyone around you is living inside their own spotlight, managing their own fears, replaying their own small embarrassments, and giving you far less attention than you assume. The harsh judge you imagine standing in the crowd, watching your every move, is mostly a projection of your own self-awareness, not an accurate picture of the people actually in the room. Understanding this will not make every awkward moment disappear, and it will not switch off the instinct entirely, because that instinct is wired deep into how human brains evolve to think about social risk. But the next time you trip slightly on a rug in a crowded room or feel your face go red after a comment you wish you could take back, you now have something most people never stop to consider. You have the knowledge that